Welcome to the Courage Barbell Unlimited podcast with your host, legendary powerlifter and strength athlete, Chad Ikes. For most, the journey of strength starts in the gym, but should inevitably expand through all aspects of life. Join us as we discuss all things strength. Now, here's your host, Chad Ikes.
Hey everybody, I'm back again with another awesome guest. It's interesting to me. I just did a roundtable with Dave Tate and Elite FTS, and
Cool.
Dave at one point put me on the spot, and he's like, "So, what is your biggest takeaway from all the guests that you've did on your podcast?" And I'm like, "Oh, dude, I'm not ready for that question at all because I'm always thinking, so I didn't think of that." But it just dawned on me. One of the cool things about having this podcast and having the guests is how they keep leading to more and more interesting people. I mean, I kind of got to know you from Dr. Landier, and then who knows who I'll meet from you, and it just like keeps going, and I keep finding all this awesome information and stuff. Today, we have Sarah Buckley, who has her CSCS, her FRA, her FRS, which I actually didn't totally know. That's a lot of mobility, stability, a lot of really cool, really interesting stuff, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have her on, is I feel a little kinship, because she is a powerlifter too, and I've always preached, like, you need mobility and flexibility, and powerlifters tend to get away from that. So you also have persistence fitness training. So do you guys have and you're in Cincinnati too. What, that whole area is just insane.
Yeah, you cannot swing a cat around here without like hitting a gym.
Yes.
It's cool because we're kind of in the Midwest. I don't think, the Midwest is necessarily known for health and fitness. But we have a really strong gym community in this neck of the woods. So yeah, I have my own personal training business, which is Persist Fitness. Mm-hmm. But then I'm also co-owner of a brick and mortar facility, which is called Prevail Strength and Movement. So okay. I have a couple of businesses that I run, and I'm part of, myself is just Persist Fitness, but my other stuff, I like to, collaborate with people who kind of have the same foundational philosophy as me about how to help people through fitness, but maybe express it in different ways so that, we have like a diverse community that's able to serve a wide clientele.
I totally agree. Symbiotic relationships, everybody benefits and everyone else benefits, and it's a whole big energy thing.
Even if I wanted to, I couldn't train every single person in Cincinnati. So, we just got to build relationships. And I'm also just really passionate about kind of like elevating, incoming trainers. I don't some people kind of stumble into this career because they were an athlete or they were a strength athlete, and then they started like turning over their knowledge to other people. But this is my second career. And when I first came in, it's like the Wild West. It's like, what do I just start working with people? Like, what do I do? And so, so I'm interested in education. I'm interested in professional development, I just trying to help clients and also help coaches be better coaches.
That's actually a really interesting thought, because pretty much anybody you can just start personal training, or you can you can go get a certificate. Yep. And I've actually long time ago applied for a couple of those certificates and went, no, I can't do this. This is all wrong. Like, this is insane. Yeah. I don't even want to be associated with this.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's because getting the piece of paper, that might cover you for liability, this, that, and the other. But really, once you kind of get through your first couple of years of training, and most trainers will say, like, you would give this advice, I just met you 2 minutes ago, but you would just say, start working with people, right? Start learning about the human body, try things on yourself, start, keep people safe, but start experimenting. And so everything that I've had success with my clients and that I believe in is something that, has kind of it was a conduit through me. Like, I started experimenting with myself, and even with my training partners. I'm lucky to be around, some of the top athletes in the world. So I know if it works on them, it's going to work on, a general population community as well.
On that same note, like even now, I've been in this. Somebody asked me this morning, how long have you been doing this? I'm like, I've been lifting over 40 years. Yeah. And still, right now, I'm like, hey, I'm going to go back and try this. or I want to try this, and I'll try it on myself for a while. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And then I'll explain it to some of my clients, and they're like, yeah, I want to try that too. I'm like, cool, let's do it. Yeah. And so, I mean, and I feel like as a trainer, and I do want to get into conjugate with you too, because I love conjugate.
Yeah.
There's so many, I really, the more I talk and the more I interview people and the more I'm in this industry, there is no one thing. So like, I know a lot of people really discredit this or that. And I have my feelings. There's certain things I like, certain things I don't like. Yeah. But I don't completely rule it out. Because it's been around for a long time, so it worked for somebody. So maybe there is
you could have that one human that benefits from it. So it is important to know the other stuff, even if it's not your main way.
Yeah, and I think it really boils down to, as an individual, it's figuring out what works for you. As a coach, one of my biggest things is trying to help people, my clients, figure out what works for them. I mean, even with nutrition, and nutrition is really important. It's just something I have more of a passion for lifting. Yeah. But I still help them with nutrition. And I'm like, there's a reason there's all these different diets. Yeah. Yeah. And I've done diets that they're horrible for me, but I see people get lean as hell on them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm similar. Like, I know enough to be dangerous with nutrition, but if someone really wanted to get like super dialed in, or if they had, like medical needs or something like that, I would just need to like refer them to a different coach. But
that's what I do.
Like I can make an impact, but I'm also kind of more about like behavior change and stuff. Like my preference, I don't want to tell someone what to eat. I want to arm them with skills. That my whole thing is providing autonomy for the person. So getting an individual to know themselves better and starting to be able to serve themselves. So they need me less and less. And so, I want them to have strategies and tools and coping mechanisms and education so that they can start to take control of stuff.
We are very similar.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
I tell people all the time, I go, I'm the worst businessman in the world. Because I'm going to teach you what I know, and I'm going to teach you how you don't need me. I mean, if you want to, I'll train you for the rest of my life. But at some point, it's basically going to be a collaboration between the two of us as to what you're going to do.
Relationship, and I do, because I'm so passionate about education. Like, I really want to say, I'm going to teach every single time I see my clients. I'm going to try to teach you something new, or I'm going to explain something in a new way, so that maybe it's a lift that we've been doing for 10 years together, and I want you to say to me, oh, I never thought of it like that before. So I think that withholding information is actually worse for business, because I just want to share what I know. And I think that comes off as being very genuine to the people, and they trust me because they think, oh, she cares enough to tell me, to take the time to explain this versus kind of saying, well, just don't let me worry about that. You don't need to know. Like, I'm never going to, I know human bodies, but I don't know your body. You got to tell me what's going, that has to happen between us. I can't be in charge. I can only be a guide, and I don't want to be in charge. Yeah.
So I've really been going down this whole energy thing lately. And I really believe the foundation of meeting your fitness goals is your mentality.
Yeah.
Because if you have something inside you haven't dealt with, and you have this negativity all the time, I don't care how hard you work, you might get better, but you're going to have a really hard time achieving your goals. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I'm going to ask you, if you feel like I feel like when I explain things to my clients and I tell them what I'm thinking, here's where I'm going, here's kind of our plan, I think they get invested in their own goal. I mean, seriously invested in their goals. Yes. And I think that changes the energy, and I think that helps them do a better job of getting there. And then because they understand it, they know, they're like, oh, I'm doing this for this, not like I'm doing this because Chad told me.
Exactly. Yeah. There are some people who want to come in and kind of check the box and sort of, and to a certain extent, that's okay. I understand. And when I first became a trainer, I felt like I kind of always had to position myself as sort of the authority and the expert. But, now sometimes I might change my mind mid-session about what we're doing. I might say, actually, you know what? I don't like how this is playing out. This is not going in the direction, and this is not giving me the result that I intended it to. So just, we're not doing that right now. We're going to go do something else. Or exactly like you're saying, I think having the client involved, you know, and kind of saying like, they're telling me a goal, and then I'm going to say, okay, this is what I'm thinking for our plan. This, and this. You know, how does that sound? Do you understand why we're doing those things? Okay, here's the general timeline. And then just know that I always tell people, like, it's never like set in stone. We always have flex within a certain window to make adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, we have to be able to adjust to like all the stuff that's happening outside the gym as well. So,
well,
you know,
it's like you said, and I tell my clients the same thing. I'm gonna listen. I know what I'm doing. Like, I can make you better. I go,
yeah.
But you're an individual, and no matter how much I think I know as a coach, I can never know your body as good as you know it.
Yeah.
Now, the caveat to that is you might not know what's going on in your body. So we need to learn to communicate, and then I can help you understand better what's going on in your body. You can better communicate back to me, and then I can better make the changes we need. And I think that shows actually that you have more intelligence. And like you said, changing it. I may go, hey, today we're going to do this exercise with that person. And I'm like, hey, we're doing this for your triceps. Are you feeling it in your triceps? And I'm touching their triceps and trying to get them to feel it. And maybe on that day, it's like, you know what? Let's just switch to a different one because you're not feeling it where I need you to feel it. So let's switch you today. And then we can come back to this later and focus more on the mind-muscle connection. But it might be easier with a different exercise. And to me, totally. That's the smarter coach.
Yeah, I agree. Like, everybody doesn't need to be doing the same thing, and because nobody's going to get the same thing out of all the same exercises. Like, my leverages are not the same as my training partner. Mm-hmm. You know, we might be doing something similar, but our intent might be different. Even if externally we're all doing the same thing, like, you have to know yourself. And this is what I want my people to understand and know, is kind of like, how do you evaluate your body? And so that conversation kind of starts from day one. You know, I work with a lot of women. I didn't mean for that to happen. That's just kind of like the way my path went. But women tend to be completely dissociated from their body. So, like, to your point, when you're talking about the client who, you know, we're trying to get into the tricep and we want to feel it, and you're like, I see your muscle contracting. I know that this load is working for you because you're displaying effort, but you aren't feeling it. Mm-hmm. And there's something going on there, and that's like a neurological thing, right? And so a lot of, like, I just have found in my practice that, you know, people, when they don't know themselves, they don't trust their physical capacity. They might not have physical capacity. They might be brand new to exercise. It can be really hard for them, and like both physically and emotionally, to kind of like look internally and try to physically feel themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I like about some of this mobility training, because it switched my mind on to thinking about what I call tissue specific training. So I get really down in the weeds with people saying like, okay, this is the general footprint. This is the general squat pattern that I want. But we're going to talk about where you feel this and how you feel this and how hard it is and all of that stuff. But I'm targeting a very specific tissue for you. It might be like your, you know, hip external rotator. So if you're not getting into that tissue that I want you to, I'm going to change your position, even if you look totally different than every other person in this building. Yeah. That's fine with me, because I just sort of changed. I'm no longer interested in training the movement pattern. I'm now interested in training the human being. Mm-hmm. And I think that language that makes sense to them now, is like, oh, okay, yeah, that's my hip. I know where my hip is now. And then I can say things like, oh, remember when we were doing our squats or doing this, that, and the other, and you felt your hip? I want you to find that same sensation again. You know, now we're doing something different, but you're going to use the same muscles. And so I think that, again, that's just a way for people to get introduced to their own biology. Mm-hmm. When they might have never felt a sensation like that before.
That's a really interesting thought. I've never thought about it exactly that way, but that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Because, and that's okay. Here, I'm going in 900 different directions. Give me what's your, how did you get into sports and then into lifting and into, like, give me a cliff notes on that.
Yeah, the real short version is I've been in athletics my whole life. I was a 4-sport athlete in high school. I ran cross country, I ran track, I wrestled, and I played soccer. And when I was in college, I continued to run track. I was a 400-meter runner and a 400-meter hurdler. And I'm a gym rat. I like exercise. I got introduced to lifting when I was in college, and I love to train. Like, I don't care what it is. I love to train. I've done every possible physical thing on planet Earth I will try at some point before I die. But weightlifting, it just helped me. It got me, I am not like my genetics. I'm not naturally inclined to be strong. I was an endurance runner. Something I'm proud of is that I've been lifting now, like you shared, for 40 years. I've now been lifting for 15 years straight. And my lean body mass is what I weighed in college, my entire body. So that's like, to me, it transformed me, my body. I got into powerlifting after college. I did some more running, but I wanted to compete again. And the only thing that was available was, oh, you're a runner, go do a marathon. And I was like, well, I ran the 400, but I guess I'll run a marathon. Like, I guess I'll do this. I didn't like it, but just was like, okay, I guess this is my life now, because this is the only opportunity to compete as an adult at the thing that I know that I am kind of good at. And then one day on the internet, I saw some chick squat 400 pounds, and I was like, okay, that looks cool. I think this is for me. Because I never stopped lifting after college, but I was just doing it for like health and exercise.
Right.
I wasn't a personal trainer yet. So I was already like reading and thinking, okay, I was programming for myself. Like, I was doing all that experimentation just for myself, figuring out what I liked in the gym. And then I've had a couple of injuries, all related to running, none related to lifting. And I got introduced to this style of training by a guy named John Quint. He worked out, he's a neuromuscular therapist. He worked with Louis. He came out of West Side. And he started teaching me this stuff. And the thing that turned me on to this style of training was he helped me to understand that by doing this style of training, really any training in general, I just had never thought about this before, but really specifically thinking about turning all this stuff internal, is that I have complete control to change my biology. So if I want to be a person that can, well, just like say, I want to squat 600. If I want to be a human being that can squat 600 pounds, I can change my entire biology to become that person. So it's like, if I'm at this point in my training, am I the person that can train 600? No, I'm not. How do I become that? I have to input different stimulus. Some of it's physical stimulus, some of it's mental stimulus, some of it's emotional stimulus, to actually change the person I am, to now become that person that can achieve the goal that I want. And I had always been into accountability and all of that, but knowing that I had complete control, I was like, oh, I can do literally anything I want. This is sick. Yeah.
So that's really interesting. I kind of had a similar trip. I had to stop throwing the shot put in college.
Okay.
And I just kept lifting because I love to lift. And then at like 27, I found powerlifting.
Yeah, that's about when I started.
I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. This is kind of cool. Like, I miss competing, and kind of got into it. So one of the things I noticed throughout my career is I always kind of paid attention to my flexibility, just from my background in sports.
Yeah.
But I noticed that as I got better and better and better, and, and I have my sleep issues and stuff, and we're squatting 1,100, 1,200 pounds, benching 800, 900. I got more and more to where all I was doing was lifting heavy, and I wasn't doing any of this other stuff. Yeah. And then kind of after that, I started looking back and I go, wait a minute, Chad, like you were, I could still almost do the splits even at my biggest. But compared to the flexibility and mobility I had earlier, it was kind of gone. And so I went, wait a minute, like mobility is important. Just because we're big and we're powerlifting, we still need to keep all that mobility and that flexibility. Yeah. And that's where today I push it a lot. And then I train all kinds of clients. And I have clients in their 70s, which flexibility and mobility is huge because they stop moving. Right. But I had done the same thing looking back over my powerlifting career. I'm like, Chad, you stopped moving.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I had horrible supination. My anterior shoulders were getting tighter and tighter. And I was like, wow. So that's common,
obviously. Yeah.
When we started talking, I really liked the fact that, like, the first couple messages I think we sent each other, we started talking about mobility, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I got to get her on here.
Yeah.
Did you always know that going through, or was it you kind of got to a point where you went, wait a minute?
So, yeah, in 2018 is when I started working with John, and he was just basically like he was giving me the stuff that now I give to other people. Mm-hmm. Like, he was starting to teach me this system, but I didn't know about it. I was just basically going to him for an appointment, and he would say, okay, do this, this, and this. And I was like, and I've been an athlete forever. I've had every possible kind of like physical therapy, dry needling, like every single thing that's out there. I've experienced it, and I've gotten different types of value from different types of modalities. But this was the first thing where I was like, oh, even though he's he's a therapist, and I thought this was going to be kind of like a passive recovery, like, experience, he's giving me homework and I'm doing it myself, and it's lasting. Mm-hmm. Like, because before, what I was experiencing was kind of like, oh yeah, like this massage or these dry needles, like it's making me feel better, but all it's really providing is like this window for me to now input work. Yeah. But I'm just continuing to input the same work. So it's not resolving the thing that got me here in the first place. So when he started, just the way that he works is similar. Like, he's just educating me about this, and I'm starting to realize, like, this is really working. I want to continue to get, and at this point, like, I was a coach and everything. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start to get educated on this. And that's kind of where I started, was again, just with my own body. And then as I started to feel more proficient in understanding how things needed to be integrated for powerlifters, I just started teaching it to my training partners. Mm-hmm. And saying, like, hey, let's try this together. Let's see what happens. Let's run this for 6 weeks. Let's run this for a meet prep. Let's talk this through. Let me experiment. Let me evaluate you. Let me assess you. So everybody let me, kind of like touch them and get my hands dirty. Yeah. But again, like, I'm so lucky because these are the top athletes in this sport. These are some of the best athletes on planet Earth. So it's like, if it's working with them and they're in the 5%, this is going to work with every other mm-hmm. single person that I come in contact with. So I was lucky to have that training and learning environment. And Laura just was basically like, okay, let you explain it to me. Let's talk it through. It makes sense. It makes sense. And, then she just we just went from there.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I've always talked about that. And I get frustrated with all the popular, basically the modalities out there. It's like, mm-hmm. oh, well, you need to do the tempering or the rolling or this or that. And I would go to the gym, and there's these 20-year-old kids that got to roll for 45 minutes before they can squat. Yep. I'm 50 and I can walk in and just start doing it. Like, totally. What is wrong with you guys? And even like I know a bunch of the guys up at Kabuki Strength, and they're great guys, and they say the same thing. It's like, this modality is just to get you better. But if you don't fix the problem, it's not going to work. And that was actually kind of one of the problems I had when I started going to school for physical therapy and didn't finish because I got frustrated. Yeah. Is that it was like, you're just trying to fix it to get it better, but if the same action keeps happening, the same problem is going to keep coming up.
Yes. And I think so, like, I'm a coach, I'm not a physical therapist, but that is something that people like you, some physical therapists, but like, I wouldn't, similarly, like, that wouldn't make sense for me. I can go to college for this. I went to college for something completely different, had another job. I'm not sure I would have been able to kind of do what I do now if I had taken that kind of traditional path, because I just disagree with so much of the things that they're teaching.
I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't have known any different then, but I think, I'm happy that it worked out this way. But yeah, to your point kind of about, like, I would never tell someone to not do something unless I really thought that it was going to cause harm. Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, you can roll out, you can go to your massage, you can do all this till the cows come home. It is going to maybe alleviate pain, which will downregulate your central nervous system, which will allow us to do more work. And also, athletes, but I work with a lot of general population people. They are so strapped for resources, time, money. So I'm like, we could either take care of this in training, and I can give you 2 or 3 things to do at home, or you can go pay someone $150 to touch you. Mm-hmm. And it's another hour out of your week. I'm fine with you doing that, but just know that it's more money and more time with less moving the needle.
I almost think this is one of them areas where I really want to change the thinking in the gym. I want to abolish meathead mentality.
Yeah.
Because it seems like a lot of people, it's like, what can I do to keep training? What can I do to keep training? It's like, well, first of all, maybe you need to back off training just a little bit till we get this fixed. Yeah. And you can go do your roller and loosen it up and maybe get you through that training session. But every time you come in, now your muscles are all jacked up again. Let's just fix your muscles so you don't have to deal with this at all.
Yeah, like a lot of the physical therapy, just that side, and even strength coaches who are not invested in this style of training, they are interested in kind of like, we're going to get you back to where you were, and it's like, but where you were got you injured.
Yeah,
like, that's not good. Like, we need to be better. Like I said, we need to create a completely different human. We need to change your biology because your previous biology would not withstand what you were doing. Mm-hmm. So that's not acceptable to me. And I think, like, to your point, I haven't been in this sport that long. This is my 7th year powerlifting, but I've been in athletics for a long time. And, I totally was. And I mean, I think when some of it's being younger, some of it's personality, but, I was totally like that diehard person. When I was in college, I was working out 3 times a day. It was just, I was an animal, like, mm-hmm. But I didn't know what I didn't know, right? Like, I didn't know to back off. I didn't know these things. But yeah, I find that the people that are saying, I'm going to do this forever, I'm going to, you're going to bury me under the bar. I'm like, cool, that's cool if you want to do that. But I'm like, it's so interesting that those people are the least susceptible sometimes to hear, like, okay, you want to be on the platform for 50 more years. Cool. You need to stop training how you're training. Like, I could help you get there. You can be on there forever, but you need to, like, really reorganize how you approach training.
I think that's that meathead mentality of, where I'm tough, I'm going to power through it. And it's like, okay, so you could be competing in your 50s or 60s and be beat to crap.
Yeah.
Or you could be competing in your 50s or 60s healthy.
Yeah. And still, I know, I like used to kind of joke like, haha, but now I'm serious, where I'm just like, I could just like outlast these bitches. And mm-hmm. It's a little bit like,
mm-hmm. A lot of them will end up just, there's not a lot of power lifters that have healthy shoulders or healthy hips or healthy knees.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of goes back to the people like, I'm dedicated. They want to say they're dedicated. They want to talk about how hard they train. And I go, but are you willing to do one less training session a week if you're overtraining and maybe stretch that day? Are you willing to add in a mobility set? You tell me you're dedicated, but what I'm hearing is you're dedicated to lifting weights, not to doing anything that helps you lift weights.
Yes.
Are you getting to bed on time? Are you eating the right nutrition? Like, you're not dedicated to anything but going to the gym and beating the crap out of yourself.
Yeah. Which, we all have those days where we just need to, like, go crazy to mm-hmm. prove to ourselves that we can do it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's good for, sometimes you just need to, like, leave it all out there.
Well, I think that can be seen as part of training the mental game.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. But I also think, like, the more mature you get as an athlete, like, the more, and I think too, just if you are truly doing everything, like if you're going to sleep and you are hydrating and you are doing your nutrition and you are taking care of your shoulder rotator cuff issue, with really specific training, then that you are totally prepared for the platform. So mm-hmm. you don't necessarily need to take those crazy lists because you're like, I'm doing my job. Yes. Like, I'm doing everything I need to do. So I feel confident in being able to perform because I've done all my stuff. And I think, kind of circling back to what you were saying with, like, there's a concept in powerlifting, which I think from the outside perspective, it's seen that way. But I think sometimes internally inside the sport, inadvertently, people forget that squatting, benching, and deadlifting are skills. It would be the same as, like, a baseball thrower throwing and practicing his pitches, like a pitcher practicing his pitches. And so we see that as it's there's, for every other sport, there's strength training in the gym and then there's skill work on the field. Mm-hmm. But our skill work just happens to align with strength training. So I think some people outside of the sport, they're like, oh, well, I don't want to train like a power lifter because they think about that's what it means to train with a barbell. And it's like, no, don't worry, you're not. But then I think sometimes powerlifters, they just become obsessed with practicing their skill when what they actually need to do is strength train. And they need to strength train specifically, which means they need to be able to know themselves, evaluate their area of weaknesses. It's like if your chest comes forward in the bottom of a squat, you know that you probably need upper back work. You need to do some good mornings. This mobility is the same kind of thought process, which is like, if you can't keep your hips open, in a squat and your knee collapses on the right side 2/3 of the way up, you need more hip external rotation. I can scream at you to open your knees forever, but it's doing you an injustice as my client. And it's not fair for me to do as your coach because I'm asking you to do something you don't physically have the capacity for. So just separating the fact that our 3 big lifts are skills and that everything else is strength training, and that you don't need to practice. Your skills don't necessarily make you stronger. They're just you practicing your skill. The strength training portion, that's what's really going to make a difference. And that's going to be accessory work and mobility work and specific conditioning work.
I completely agree. I often go, listen, the tennis will have a tennis coach. Swim will have a swimming coach. A baseball player has a batting coach, a throwing coach.
Coach, yeah.
Like, so
first line coach, yeah.
So why doesn't powerlifting look more at that? And like your squat, it's a skill. You need to perform it with the best technique possible in the most efficient way for you. And so if you can't hit the position, you're not going to be as strong as you can. So you need to work on your flexibility and mobility, especially like the knee thing. I know people that will keep going, well, I'll just keep doing it and eventually I'll get it. It's like, dude, you're taking the long ass way around. Like, just figure out what's weak and start working on that. I mean, the whole reason we do the skill is so you can look at the skill and go, hey, here's what we need to fix. Now let's move over here and fix it. You don't have to squat.
Skill is just a way for us to collect data. It's a skill, it's a way for us to find out. And also because there's so many things happening for instance, in a squat, that looking at just the whole global movement doesn't always let us know the right information either. So for instance, breaking it down even further. So it's like, okay, if you and I were, at a meet and we were watching a lifter and, maybe her right knee collapses like every single time, it could be something in her hip, but it also could be something in her lumbar spine. So we would need, like for me, if it was me and if she came to me for this issue and I was to help her, I would isolate the spine, do some testing on the spine. I would isolate the hip, do testing on the hip. And then I would say, okay, it's a hip issue. And what is the hip issue? Is it that you don't have enough space in your hip capsule? Is it that you lack connective tissue architecture in your hip capsule? And then based on, what that evaluation tells me, then we decide what the stimulus is. It's the exact same thought process as at looking at global external strength training. So this mobility training that I do, we call it internal training, but same thing. We'll use the example of the squat where someone's chest falls and they're coming up. So you're thinking, okay, we need upper back stuff. We need good morning stuff. We might need some hamstring stuff. So you're choosing things to plug into programming based on what you're seeing. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to look at just the joint. And just the things surrounding the joint. And the better that, your squat is not going to give you better hips. In fact, if you are a geared lifter, your gear will steal range of motion from you every single time you get in it. So your range is just shrinking, 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 shrinking. You might be able to figure it out because you're an athlete and you are crazy and you're going to hit depth no matter what. But at some point, because you're using your, SI joint to hit depth instead of your hip flexor, like you can use an SI joint to hit depth for 1,000,000 times under. But
I think in that instance, though, it also goes back to having the athlete that knows, and people make this big mistake in gear. They'll go where the gear tells them to go.
Oh my God.
And I go, you have to go where you're supposed to go when you force the gear. Yes. So don't mess things up to hit depth. Like you have to stay in position. Yeah. And even with the bending over in the squat, I can take that further too and go, well, listen, yes. Are they really rooting? Is this a technique issue? Are they rooting hard enough and stabilizing their hips?
Yeah. And is it technical? Is it strength? Is it because they lack mobility and they cannot move to the position that this physical task is demanding of them? Yeah. So it's not as straightforward as just strengthen your upper back.
But in other sports, I know in throwing, A good throwing coach would be like, yeah, something's off. Here, let's break down. And they'll break the movement down. Like a thrower doesn't always just go throw the whole practice. They have tons of different drills. A good coach has different drills to kind of see what's happening. What do we need to fix? Where's this breaking down?
Even breaking down global ranges of motion and training the top half of your squat. Same thing. Mm-hmm. You can train, the last in 10 degrees of your internal rotation on your shoulder. Mm-hmm. That's going to help you press off your chest, that kind of stuff. So it's important for people to kind of understand that. But yes, that is a huge pet peeve of mine with the gear is people just sort of letting it just push them around and do this and that. And I'm like, the way that I think about the gear is that it's actually connective tissue. It becomes part of my body. And in order to load that properly, how do you load your hamstrings? You lengthen them. How are you going to load your suit? You need to lengthen all that stuff. But if your actual tissue directly underneath your gear isn't also lengthening, it's not going to act appropriately. Mm-hmm. So again, you have to train that human body to do the appropriate thing in order to be strong enough to manipulate the gear that you have to get the biggest return out of it.
And I think that's the big thing is it's like, okay, if I can squat raw and keep my knees out in a good position, that's great. Mm-hmm. But do you have the strength to do that in a suit?
Exactly.
Because you still have to be out there. And I tell people all the time, I go, listen, if the suit allowed you to get down in position easily, it wouldn't give you anything back. Yeah. The whole idea of gear is you have to push against it. But the same thing happens if you're squatting, if you're lifting raw.
Yes.
Because I tell people you need to tense your muscles. You need to root and build the IAP, and you need to squeeze everything as hard as you can. So really, they should feel very similar.
Yeah, if you understand your body and you're doing it appropriately, I always think, and I try to cue people this way, but it's a harder concept to learn, is that I'm actually pulling myself into the hole through my feet. Mm-hmm. The top of my feet are contracted so hard, and then my every muscle around my tibia, my shin bone is contracted so hard to shorten. Everything is shortening in the front, where I think some people are just simply trying to drop, which I think you can get away with obviously in raw, but you're going to lack control. You're not going to load your hamstrings appropriately. Some people can't even contract their hamstrings without moving. They can't stand. Again, so not knowing their body well enough to have control of all these individual elements. And that's what what the mobility training is that I believe in is all about, is you need to be able to control all of the individual elements to call it all in when it's time. Mm-hmm. You can't just call it all in without having trained them and cross your fingers that everybody's going to show up. Because you need to be able to have that tension. You need to be able to have the rotation, the positioning. If you're not in good position, what's the point?
I don't know how right now, because sometimes I'm kind of dumb. Mobility and flexibility has always more for me been dude, this is going to keep your joints healthy. This is going to keep your joints from being hypertensive. It's going to keep your muscles from being hypertensive. But honestly, now that you say that as a way to also learn feedback of those muscles and to learn how to control those muscles, that's given me a whole new dynamic on mobility work.
Yeah, I actually do a lot of max effort mobility work with people because the max effort stimulus aimed at a joint will create more capsular space. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people say you don't mow your lawn and your grass grows in. If you don't move your joints regularly and move them into their end ranges, tissue is going to collapse in on that, and you're going to just get less and less space, which is going to decrease the amount of movement you can have, mm-hmm. which obviously we need to, at the minimum, we need to have just human being requirements for joints. Right. Because if we, for instance, your shoulder, if we can't flex it, it's no longer a shoulder. It's just this aberrant thing in your body. Right. And so I will teach people max effort. And that might be the first time I introduce max effort to them outside of lifting. But the cool thing is that I'm teaching them to irradiate that max effort through their entire body, which of course, as we know, this is just what we talked about. That's required for proper lifting. And also regular people are able to get the other benefits of a max effort stimulus without having to be under a barbell, like all of the good stuff it does for your endocrine system. Like it's going to increase your stress tolerance, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like a fun benefit for me, because I believe everybody should be exposed to some kind of max effort stimulus, but that doesn't mean it's heavy lifting all the time.
So what would be an example of a max effort shoulder mobility stimulus?
Good. So it could be, so for instance, say you were trying to increase your range of motion, your overhead position, which a lot of powerlifters don't have.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a progression, exactly like we progressively overload a lift for accessory work or whatever we're doing. You have to find where your end range is. And that's going to be based on kind of like either you observing yourself or someone who knows what they're doing observing you. And finding your true end range is going to depend on where can you move your shoulder joint without any other part of your body coming along for the ride. Right.
Such as your scapula.
Yeah. Or thoracic or low back or whatever. Yeah. So we want just absolutely clean shoulder. And then from there, there's a mechanism, a setup that's called pails and rails. Have you heard of that, Chad?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it needs to be trained appropriately. It's a system. It can go wrong, but it can go right as well, where essentially you ramp up to driving forces into that joint. So you might take, just like you would do a set, say you're working up to a max effort squat, you're going to get under the bar, you're going to do a set of 10, you're going to go 155, whatever, so on and so forth. Your intensity is going to increase as the sets go on, but at some point you're going to drop down to just singles, right?
Right.
Similar to this. So we start out with a 1 minute stretch and we're sending, say 60% effort into that joint, something we could do for like a set of 10 under the bar. So we're starting to teach people about intensity through their own body, and they are focused on sending that energy into the shoulder. And I'm saying, do you feel this? Do you feel this? If it's your overhead position, I want you to feel a stretch here. Are we getting anterior stretching? Are we getting contraction in the back a little bit? Okay, cool. And then we're going to put them I end up putting them in I'm going to do a little demo here. Basically, like an easy setup would be if you had a bench and you would take them to end range and you're going to end up pushing down into the bench. So it's an isometric. You want to set people up for isometrics.
And you're actually having them hold weight?
No. Well, they could if you get really good.
Or is the max effort part the stretch?
Yeah, the max effort part is going to be both the stretch, which is called the pails, where you're kind of pushing down, but then also you're going to lift back and away, which it's effort based, because if you put someone and you set them up at their end range, they actually aren't going to they won't be able to go into deeper shoulder flexion, but you're going to tell them, try to pull your arm away, try to pull back. And what's going to happen is they'll contract all of their posterior shoulder tissue, all of that rotator cuff stuff. And externally as a coach, I might not see a single millimeter of movement, but inside the joint, what's happening is that stuff's starting to move and that stuff is starting to rotate. And we are we're mowing the lawn. We're creating more space in that joint. So the correct protocol is you do a 2 minute passive stretch, you do a 1 minute, maybe 60% effort. And then I usually do 2 30 seconds at like 70 to 80, another 30 second at like 80. And then I do 1 7 to 10 second max effort bout, because you can't really do true max effort for longer than 10 seconds. It just starts to fade. And that whole thing takes, 5 minutes.
So
you've now done a max effort.
When they're losing like it just slipped my mind, but they're losing the mobility in their shoulder, like, is that the like the shoulder capsule's tightening up and then all the muscles are tightening up in there, so they're losing the space where the shoulder normally moves?
Correct. Yeah. So your joint capsule, it's 2 bones, and they shouldn't touch. There should be space in between them. Yes. And then basically there's, I think of like this, and then there's like a capsule that goes around there. And then that capsule is the thing that allows things to move. And if you have
keep that fluid in there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's a very, very small capsule, you're going to just run right into it, and your range is going to be very limited. So,
and the more you try to go in a range, the more those two bones are going to push together, probably.
Correct. And you might get like, closing angle pain, which everybody has probably had to some extent. Like you do this and you get pinching in the front of your shoulder. You try to go to depth and the front of your hip pinches.
Right.
So that, those are indications that, you have dysfunction in that joint and you better give that some attention.
So I've always had this thought, and I'm going to ask you what you think about it.
Yeah.
That like powerlifters should have at another training session day in, say a recovery or a GPP session, where they go play catch, where they throw a football.
Talk about this with Leah.
Or where they play baseball. Like that should be their training session, is to go out and move and use your whole body. Because if you're really tight, you're going to throw a baseball like shit.
Yeah.
You have to be loose and mobile, and your muscles have to fire in the correct order. And I've always thought if I could get powerlifters to start moving more, it would have a tremendous effect on them. And I'm into BMX bikes, and I have quite a few BMX bikes. So I started taking my clients. I'm like, all right, tomorrow's like recovery day. We're going for a ride. Yeah. And I'll give everybody a bike and we'll go ride like 7 miles. And we're talking single gear. You can't sit down because the seats are dropped.
Oh shit, that sounds hard.
But everybody's dying, but they're like, man, that was so fun. So mentally, I think the mental energy is good. Totally. But just having them move their knees and their hips and their body and have to use their upper body and their lower body together and just get them, because it's like powerlifters don't move. No,
they get really good at stabilizing. Mm-hmm. Like the spine is a great example. So like, I love that idea. Like, so my recommendation for everybody, powerlifters included, is that, and I have like a daily routine that I teach everybody that takes 7 minutes, and it takes every single joint in your body, basically, except for maybe like your knuckles and your toes, through its entire end ranges. So to maintain the range of motion that you have to touch your end range every day. And so,
use it or lose it.
Your brain has to acknowledge that it's there. Your brain has to understand that it's safe to go into that position. And if you don't visit it with frequency, it's going to start to collapse. So to me, that's the bare minimum. And I wouldn't even necessarily classify that as training. It's just sort of like, it's like brushing your teeth. Like you need to do it. But as far as like other activities and moving your body, yes. Like I, particularly with, my Gen Pop people, like I'm interested in them being able to move in every possible way. Mm-hmm. Even if it's like, I put people in unconventional movement patterns all the time. We have a drill that we do at the gym that I really like that we basically just call movement problem solving, which is we have a group of people and they have to move a heavy ass kettlebell from on top of a box to a low box, and no one can repeat how that kettlebell gets moved. So you using different. Basically, the problem is get this kettlebell from point A to point B, and the solution is movement. And if you can only move one way, you have one solution. But every single problem in our life, every single thing that we want to do is predicated by being able to move.
Yes.
And so I want to arm people with many, many solutions. And from the powerlifting lens, is it important for people to be able to stiffen up and brace and irradiate all this energy through their body so they can express maximum amounts of force and squat 5,000 pounds? 1,000%. And also, you're a human, which means you need to be able to move your spine. And if you can't move your spine, things are going to not go well.
How many lifters get hurt with way less than maximum weight?
Yes, and that's because
they don't know how to move, because they're not forcing everything like they had 1,000 pounds, and they're just moving normally.
You can literally only stabilize or nothing.
Yes.
And I started last year like a mobility program for equipped lifters as like a thought experiment for myself. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, okay, I know as equipped lifters we need this, this, and this, and I know that the gear does this, this, and this to us. And something that I ended up stumbling upon accidentally when I just started to get feedback from people was, oh, y'all don't know how to breathe. You actually can't breathe. And you're breathing into like here. You think that your blood pressure is all messed up, and it probably is from this, that, and the other. but you literally like aren't even dropping your diaphragm down to eccentrically load your pelvic floor. And so your volume that you have access to is so small. I'm like, you could be lifting 500 more pounds. Like if you just learned how to do this. And particularly in the gear, it hides it because everything is compressed. So you kind of feel like you're like, oh yeah, I'm braced because everything's tight as shit. And it's like, but that's because of the gear. That's not because of your body. So I think, yeah, like lifters just, you know, the gear hides everything. It takes skills, but you know,
one of the things I get frustrated with gear these days, the newer gear, is people are tightening up the midsections.
Yeah.
When I was still competing at my highest, I wanted my briefs to be huge so I could push into them. I wanted my suit to be tight around my hips and my legs and my straps, but I still needed to push out into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, and that depends on like where an individual can move, where an individual can't move. Like being super tight in your midsection, I don't know, you know, I personally like a snug fit. Like I just want to feel like it's on me, you know, like it feels different than just my briefs. But you know, it's going to, you know, also like your rib cage needs to move, like your rib cage kind of like that should be able to expand. If that can expand under your suit, which again, if you're strong and if you have mobile tissue in between your individual ribs and you understand that breath actually lengthens that tissue, then that is going to translate into like the front of your suit loading. But I mean, yes, of course, it can be too tight. And it doesn't, and you know, I would prefer to utilize my own bracing skills over whatever I can get from the suit personally.
Well, it's like steroids or belts or whatever you use, it should be in addition to what you can already do. And I see that a lot with belts too. And I've done a couple videos on my YouTube channel. Like stop tightening up the belt. Like you need to push into the belt.
Oh my gosh.
And if your belt doesn't give you 70 to 100 pounds, you're not using it right.
Yeah, that's I took an interesting poll when I was doing programming with people, and then they're like, yeah, I'm not feeling this. I'm like, oh, I forgot this fundamental step, which is that like you need to be able to breathe. And like I missed that completely when I started. And so then I started to backtrack and I took a poll and just asked people like when you brace and you're, you know, going for a like say 80% or above and you're wearing your belt, like where are you feeling this? And I got all kinds of wild stuff. You know, people were, in my opinion, I want people to load. I always say when you breathe in, breathe to the basement and then fill to the penthouse. So the air's got to go down first and then it's going to fill in after that, expanding everything in a 360-degree way. So people seem to kind of understand that it's not just the front and that we're also needing to breathe into our backside as well. But everybody was real shallow. It was almost like it wasn't even getting to the belt. It was almost like either their belt was too tight, so they couldn't go down and around it, or they just literally didn't know how to breathe. So their belt was just on and it was tight, but there was no air behind it. And I was like, okay, we need to like really start from scratch here, folks.
When I tell people, I go, when your belt is latched, depending on whatever belt you have, if you're relaxed, I should be able to stick 4 fingers in between the belt and you. Once you brace, I should not be able to pull my hand out.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
If you're doing it correctly. But one of my huge pet peeves is I see people brace, they push out, and then they suck in and tighten up. And I go, you just got rid of your brace. Now you no longer have a brace. Why are you tightening up? Just keep pushing out.
Yeah, just keep doing it. Yeah, and that's, again, like that's muscular endurance.
And the other thing, because I'm huge on bracing, is that a lot of people don't understand it's like a volume knob.
Yes.
If you go throw a baseball, you're still going to brace. You're not going to brace at 100%. And I have a funny story is that there was one point I lived in like a 3rd-story apartment. And I'd carry my groceries up the stairs and put them at a counter. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm out of breath. And then I'd go to pick like a penny up off the floor and I'm like, oh my God, I almost passed out. What the hell? And then I realized, oh dude, Chad, you're 100% all the time. No wonder you're about to pass out.
Yeah.
And I had to remember that it's different. And then like with I have some Division I football players and I have some IFL football players.
Okay, cool.
And when they first started with me, I'm like, listen, I need you to do this in here, and it's going to become natural on the field.
Yes.
And I've had a couple where I get them for a couple months during the summer. I can only get them so much stronger in a couple months.
Yeah.
As soon as they get back on the field, they call me and they're like, Chad, man, I'm knocking the shit out of people. Like, what did you do? That's awesome. And I'm like, you're stronger, but you're not that much stronger. I go, but now bracing has become habit to you. So your body knows when you're going to hit somebody, and it braces naturally. So all that power transfers through the ground and your feet into that player, where before it was all getting sucked up in that soft ass midsection.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of power lifters, they'll go do their accessory work and it'll be like bent over rows for 3x12. And they're just like,
no break. Yeah.
And I'm like, you are like, yeah, just don't, please. There's consequences to pushing your body that hard. Like, you should be able to breathe and there should be movement. Like, the effort that you're, expressing should match the task, should match the physical task.
And with my strongman, I have to teach, because strongmen are horrible about bracing. And they don't understand that you can brace and breathe at the same time. They're actually two different things.
Yes. Yep.
And so I get guys that start doing the farmers and they're like, holy shit, that's totally different. Or they're doing a yoke and now they're actually breathing while they're bracing.
Yeah. Yeah. I teach that. That's one of the first things I teach people. I have kind of like, like a little bit of a physical onboarding process. And it's kind of like, make sure they can breathe. And then, I'm going to teach you how to brace now. And then we're going to do those two things together. You're going to breathe and you're not going to lose your brace. And people's minds are blown.
Yeah. They have no idea.
Including strong people, where I'm like, what were you doing before? Because you're strong, and like
they weren't. But then
when they weren't as strong. Yeah, they weren't as strong as they could be, or they were like and I mean, there's so much soft tissue in that area where I'm just like, if you're not like real solid on forces are just getting driven through all of that soft tissue. Like,
well, I don't know. Have you ever seen like the buses downtown, the transit buses? It's like two buses that are connected with an accordion.
Yes.
I always use that, and I go, watch when that bus takes off and it kind of bumps, and that accordion's going in and out. That's your midsection while you're trying to squat if you don't brace. Because you have a structure of pelvis, and you have a structure of a rib cage. In your midsection, all you have is your back. Like, it's going to literally absorb energy and take it away from your lift.
Yeah. Yeah, you better be ready to go. So that was a learning on my end where I started to think, okay, I need to understand breathing better and also understand how I can use breathing as a tool to improve people's movement, and to also, again, back to what I always say is just basically introduce them to their bodies better. And I think through breathing properly, and then of course through bracing, they were able to access different areas that they now have control over, which of course, they probably feel way safer under the bar, and they're just way safer in general when they're moving their bodies.
I actually I had a lifter one time who he was a Olympic weightlifting, and he had to be taken out with the ambulance from the gym. And he started lifting again, and he was so afraid to go heavy. And I go, listen, if you just train with me give me a couple months. Yeah. And just in teaching him how to brace, he eventually, he put up with like a 700-pound squat or something. And he's like, okay, now I know I can do it, but I'm actually done lifting heavy. I don't really want to lift heavy anymore. I go, okay, but at least now you know how to keep your back healthy and safe.
Yeah, I mean, it translates to other things too, like we're talking about this through the lens of powerlifting, but this is an important skill for most people to understand, like, oh yeah, when do I brace? When do I not brace? When, so again, like just having a lot of resilience, a lot of physical resilience, a high level of physical capacity, like that is important for human beings. That's not just important for athletes. Like everybody needs these things. Yes. And it should be overlooked. Yeah.
So I was watching one of your videos, and your Instagram is persist training.
Persist fitness training.
Persist fitness training. I was watching one of your videos on there, and it may have been something with Laura. I can't remember. Okay, but you said something about conjugate, and you're like, most people see conjugate as an outline, and I see it more as principles. And I'm like, well, I actually do see it as an outline, but I see it as an outline that you can completely and utterly change.
Yeah,
like there's nothing I can't change in conjugate. And even I have a couple right now that are 74. I basically train them conjugate.
Yep.
I mean, our max efforts aren't crazy max efforts. It's more, I'll switch from 3 sets of regular strength training, but it's like, this is the main movement. or it'll be like 5 sets of 5. And then every now and then I'll be like, let's test a little bit where you're at. You know, and I may not hit speed work quite as heavy, but like I truly believe that conjugate can be modified to everybody. And
Yes.
that's why I prefer it over things like linear periodization and some of the other stuff, because it's like, really, if you look at it, in my mind, it's completely morphable to anybody in any situation.
Yes, I agree completely. You know, it gets associated with powerlifting because of Louis. That's cool. Like if he had been like, you know, Westside's into like a lot of like MMA and martial arts stuff now. Like that's kind of more what they're getting known for. But if Louis was known for like soccer and he applied this conjugate, then conjugate would be associated with soccer.
Yes.
Because it is so, like you said, malleable. And yeah, I'm really passionate about, I use that system for all of my general population clients that I use, like, you know, and so, yeah, just speed work might look different for different individuals, but it's more about making sure that we're hitting the stimuli, in the appropriate fashion. So, you know, it might not be maxing out every week, but, you know, it is maxing out in some form, maybe under the bar, maybe through mobility. You know, we are training for, you know, again, all of the different positions we're doing, you know, variation within reason, because, you know, movement patterns out in the real world do not mimic movement patterns under the bar. So I don't like to train that way either. So, you know, conjugate kind of encompasses that as well. And then what I have sort of pushed my own practice and my own training into, and this is how I like to work with my powerlifters as well, is that mobility is integrated within a training session. So you don't get a separate mobility training session. You're doing it simultaneously inside of your regular training session. It gets prioritized in the exact same way. I can control the intensities how I want to. It doesn't get kind of like accidentally sidelined because, oh, I'm going to do it before my workout or after my workout. And no. We're doing everything all together. And having a grasp on the conjugate system and kind of understanding how I can flex has allowed me to integrate that so seamlessly.
So give me an example how you would integrate mobility into like just a general, say, a dynamic bench day or something.
Yeah, so dynamic bench, and I actually did a presentation on this for the NSCA, and people, of course, like the NSCA is like the, you know, National Strength and Conditioning, like their level, their understanding of conjugate is very low. They have a lot of strength coaches that are still doing linear and all this stuff, but essentially, so here's an example. We did bench against band this week, and it was our last week, and I think we had like a 10x2. So this was our last week in the wave for 10x2. In between their bench sets, I have my clients hit pails and rails, and this wave, I wave my mobility in the exact same wave I wave my bench. So they have 10x2 for bench against bands, full range of motion, and then they're going to go and they're going to train side lying, internal rotation, pails and rails. When it's their turn again, they're going to go. So back and forth. So basically, instead of taking the 30-second rest or whatever, they're going to do their mobility training, and it takes essentially the same time. And then I program accessory work, kind of similar, just like whatever they need. That's more just regular training. And then I typically do something as a finisher that is more specific to like connective tissue. So something that everybody in the powerlifting world knows about is like do band pull abouts, do tricep press downs. This is where I really like to get into like that tissue specific training. So, you know, Louis was right. Everybody was right that banded press downs for high volume is going to send blood into your triceps. It is good for recovery. It is going to give you a pump, but it's still only training one line of tension. So what I like to do is I like to incorporate multiple lines of tension to make sure that we're hitting multiple parts of the tricep, because on the strength curve, you know, my medial head might be stronger than, you know, something else in my arm. So I want to make sure that I'm reaching failure and I'm reaching the correct stimulus in every single part of my tricep, not just the one that is my extender. So that's a very general answer to your question, but it's not much different. It's just that a lot of it.
It's actually pretty simple.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Yeah. So like I just decide. And so that's how I train my in-client people. With my power lifters, I have them do a little bit more like segmented work. for instance, like in their accessory, instead of doing just like a bent over row, I'm going to have them take that bent over row. And Laura and I collaborate a lot. So maybe she has like 3x12 single arm bent over row. I might say, okay, this week is what we're programmed externally. Internally, we're going to work on end range control in our scapula. So I want to make sure that you're going to pronate as far as you can. And then you're going to just retract as far as you can with that load. And then you're going to go into your row. So that, again, that's not like turning the world upside down, but it's making sure that the lifters are training their end ranges and they're not just throwing weight around.
You just hit on one of my other pet peeves. Get so sick of people doing rows and they do them heavy and they're like, I do 315-pound rows. And I'm like, you can't do 135 right. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
And because people never work that end range. And what I actually talked to one of the people from Kabuki one time, because they trained with I know the full range, the full movement pattern of it.
Yeah.
But what I find is a lot of people cannot scapularly retract. And I'm like, okay, so when you deadlift and or when you squat and that bar's in your back, where are you at? You should be in full retraction. You should be able to hold it.
Yeah.
When you bench press, where are you going to be? I train full retraction and hold it. Well, if you can row up 400 pounds, but you can't retract it and hold it, of what use is it? So I often switch my clients up from just what you said. Yeah. I'll be like, I'll either have them go in full retraction and do the whole range of motion with their arm with their scaps tight.
Yeah.
Or I'll have them do full protraction into retraction first, get it all the way up, and then row it up. And I'm always switching the rows up to make sure that they're getting that full range.
Yeah. So so like, it's kind of just like going from small to big. So it's like working with the isolated joint, making sure that we're carving that stuff out. And then we need to be able to apply that isolated movement to a global movement. And hey, if somebody has really good scapular retraction and they're strong, I don't necessarily have a problem with them doing super heavy, like bent over rows that don't go all the way, because I'm like, yeah, you're at some point you need to go heavier in order to get stronger. And maybe it's not perfect, but at least you can get there. Like, you can get there for your first 3 sets, and then your last set, you're just shy of it. Right. Because you still need to train your strength from here to here. And maybe you're not strong enough to get it to here, but you still need to you still need to have the correct stimulus for that range. So it's just important to understand that. And I mean, end range is specifically for powerlifters and a lot of humans, like rotational end ranges are where I really see the biggest opportunity for training. Because we mostly are really good at retracting. We are really good at like thoracic extension because we need it under the bar. Could we all use more of it to get in a better position for deadlift? Yeah, probably. But we typically don't give our hips and our shoulders the rotational training that would optimize what we're doing.
I'm a victim of that.
Yeah, I mean,
my shoulder external is really good. My internal sucks. Yeah, my hip external is good. My internal is horrible, and I know it's having an effect on me. And it's like I'm trying to start working on it.
I mean, and that's the powerlifter body. That's like the traditional strength athlete body. Like, squatting doesn't give you better hips. It actually steals your internal rotation. Similar with benching. Like it demands internal rotation, particularly if you're in a shirt. I don't know if you're getting in your gear anymore much, but like touch it. Yeah. But like it's a high demand on internal rotation, but it actually eliminates internal rotation the more you train that way. So if you're not doing something extremely specific to mitigate that, and when I say specific, like if I'm getting in my shirt and I'm going to take 4 attempts that are, above 80%, 2 attempts above 90, I better be able to have internal rotation resiliency that allows me to press at least 300 pounds on a bar for 15 to 20 seconds, not consecutively, but over time, so that's a big demand. And the shoulder is a dinky joint.
For the health of the joint, as far as you can go one direction, you need to still always be able to go the other direction. Otherwise, over time, it's going to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I mean, where like it stops being a joint because it doesn't check all the requirements that a shoulder, in order for a shoulder to be a shoulder, it has to be able to do this, and this. And when it can no longer do some of those things, you don't have a shoulder anymore. Which means if you're doing a shoulder exercise, say a single arm dumbbell press, like you're not even using your shoulder joint anymore. So what are you doing? You're just running shit into shit.
I don't know if you train many older clients, but I have probably 40, 50s, 60s, 70s. Yeah. I've had clients come in who cannot scapularly retract anymore. Like they lost the ability. Yep. And I mean, we have to start by me going, here's your rhomboids. These need to be flexing. And I'm tapping on them and I'm trying to pull their shoulders back because like they physically have forgotten how to do that. And in every case that happens, the whole shoulder's just, their whole mobility is just fucked.
Yeah. Yeah. Like who knows which came first, but then of course it's going to go into the spine, then the thoracic spine is just going to start to curve. So that's the other thing is that like movement is helpful because it propagates movement in other places. So if you're feeling tight somewhere, you should move the adjacent joint because that's going to start to lengthen that stuff and get rid of that sensation of tightness and stiffness. And on the other side of that, if you don't move, that non-movement is just going to continue to propagate out and out and out. And so it might have started as this little teeny tiny issue here, but you don't address it. And then all of a sudden it's the whole upper left side of your back. Now we've got the scapula involved and now we've got the thoracic spine involved. And it's like, it could have just been you doing 5 minutes of work every week to address this, but instead you didn't.
And that's where it's like, I mean, if you're a power lifter, lifting takes years. It takes years and years and years. If you start with these bad habits in the beginning, by the time you really start gaining strength, now you're putting tons of stress in the wrong spots. And if it's just for natural health, I mean, my clients that are 70 whose shoulders are screwed, it probably started in their 30s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like it's good. It's gravity. Like it's going to degenerate no matter what, but like we can do something about it. We just have to make sure, that we have the right tools. And even for gen population, like I used to kind of just be like, okay, well, good enough is good enough. Like they just need to carry, push, pull, hinge, etc. But now I'm like, no, like they deserve specificity in their training as well, because they still have a human body. And so we need to make sure that those people, it can still be simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, but that doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean it's not effective. And so I've kind of changed my thinking about that. And this is something I would kind of be interested to know your take on this. This is something that I wish powerlifters understood because I think that they would get on board with this kind of training. But as far as like building muscle, most of us like have the desire and the goal to like, get more jacked, right? So if you have a joint that doesn't have the capacity to move through all of its ranges, the areas where you're not moving, you can't input stimulus, which means you can't grow muscle there. So I'm like, it makes no sense to me why people wouldn't be on board with this, because I'm like, even just getting more muscular, this could help you with hypertrophy. And if you have more muscle and then you have more muscle fibers to fire, that's going to improve your strength. You might not even have to lift any more on the bar. Now I've just given you access to brand new tissues. And,
I totally agree with that. And even more so, I've always preached flexibility. I actually had Juju Mufu on here who was awesome to talk to.
Okay.
Because he was impressed that I was so strong and still flexible. And I've preached that flexibility and mobility will make you can lift more weight just by increasing your flexibility and mobility without even getting stronger.
Precisely. Yes.
Because your muscles are going to function better, because they're going to be healthier, because your joints are going to be healthier, because you're going to be able to get into a better position. Because instead of spending 6 months rehabbing something, you never got hurt to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you managed it immediately because you understood your body and you're able to be like, oh, that's what's happening here. I need to do X, Y, and Z. And not every person, my hobby is like adjacent to my career. I get it. Not everybody's like that. But I mean, there's so much good information out there. Like people can find it if they want to.
Yeah. The information is out there if they want to go through and look. But I think with that one, I think we got to get rid of that meathead mentality especially with guys. And I think there's a big movement for women in powerlifting, which is kind of exciting for me to see. Like, I think women are going to take over powerlifting. Yeah. And I think part of it, and I know I'm going to get crap because men and women are different and I don't care what anybody says. Yeah. I think women have less of an ego issue than men. So I think, and they're not like, they don't have to go in and like totally beat the crap out of themselves every session.
Yeah.
They're like, no, hey, if I do this, it's going to make this better. And they, for some reason, it seems like they understand that better. Where the men still get stuck in, no, I just want to go pound weight and I'm going to get stronger. And it's like, it doesn't really work that way. You got to do all this other stuff. And the other stuff, like, learn to embrace it.
Yeah.
I mean, stretching kind of sucks, I admit it, but I feel really good after every time I stretch.
Yeah.
And it feels really good to hit bigger weights.
Yeah, exactly. And like this stuff doesn't feel that great to do either. Like it feels like training. It's very hard. Like it's uncomfortable. You're in uncomfortable positions. Like I'm asking people to do things that don't feel great, but it's making them better. And I'm like, it ultimately is adding pounds to your total. Like I truly believe that. I wouldn't sell it. I wouldn't talk about it. I wouldn't let my teammates do it if I didn't think it was the right thing to do. And yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you. I don't know what the difference is with the men and the women in the training that way, but like, I see that in my own clients. I see that kind of in the training partners. Like we are different. We have different strengths, but overall they seem a little bit more susceptible to like trying something out, maybe not sticking with it. Maybe it doesn't work for them, but they're not as like, this is the way.
Yes.
They're more like, oh, that person's having success with this. Perhaps there's something there for me.
And like one of my biggest ones is overtraining. And I've never had any of my women clients. They're like, oh, okay, well, what do I need to do? The men are like, no, I'm not overtraining. I can train harder. And I'm like, it's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to meet your goal, we need to replan this.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of us in this sport, and if you're serious about a sport, if you're even halfway serious about a sport, like going and doing your sport, like this is a hobby where not a lot of us are making like, I'm not making money off of this, but I'm spending a lot of my time doing it. I care about it a lot. I'm passionate about it. I surround myself with people who are the same way, but at like the end of the day, I am still, like a human. And to your point, like how are we, we have to do other things. And when we think about overtraining or we think about what we need, it's like, oh, actually less is more. And, if you address the human first and then the athlete second, and then I even say, even that it's going to be like, well, what's your sport? Human athlete and then powerlifter, human athlete, soccer player, human athlete, whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's all that skill work. That's all that specificity, there.
Well,
because,
I think it all goes to, I think you need to heal it and have your own positive energy and heal the things that are in you. That's going to make everything else better. Yeah. And then like, it's interesting how you're incorporating the mobility. Cause what I'll do is I'll be like, all right, man, like when I realized that I couldn't train heavy as much as I was, it was hard for me not to be at the gym every day, like really hard. And that's how I started incorporating like recovery sessions and GPP sessions. Yeah. And I didn't like them because I wasn't lifting heavy, but at least I got to go to the gym and I got to train. And so now I'm like, dude, like you're seriously immobile. Like you need to stretch. So let's back off one day out of the gym and have you go in and do some recovery work and then do some flexibility work or do some mobility work. And like, so I try to trick them like, you're still in the gym, dude. You're still training. This is going to make you stronger. Yeah.
What you're saying right now is exactly why I set up the programming for the powerlifters that I do. Cause I'm like, they're not going to come back for maybe a second day to do this. They are going to get done with all their heavy lifts and they're going to do this. They're either going to skip it or they're going to do it at way less of an effort than I need them to for it to be effective. So I basically just stopped calling it mobility. And I'm like, these are accessories now. Hey, your mobility accessory.
Yeah.
Like this is just important, if not more important, because we want to have like a stronger bent over row, like the example that we used before. But if you're not retracting your shoulder blade, maybe you should actually prioritize that before you add another plate to your bent over row, because just take 2 weeks to work on your shoulder blade stuff, then come back to the bent over row. Like it's not the end of the world if you're not hitting your bent over row. Like it's going to be okay. Work your shoulder blade. That's really what the bent over row is for, right? To build your back muscles. Well, do the thing that's going to allow you to build your back muscles. Yeah.
I think women understand that easier than men.
Well, I mean, and I've listened to a couple of your podcasts. Like, of course, I listened to Laura and Leah, but just a couple of the other ones. And I really admire the effort that you're making with the conversation about kind of overtraining, but particularly as it involves like mental health. Like I am a massive, I don't know, like self-proclaimed therapy head. I'm just like, go to therapy, please find, like, you think you don't need it. That would be like me saying, I don't think I need resistance training. You know, like every person on the planet needs something like that. It doesn't have to be like the most traditional version of that. But I think kind of like what you're saying about how strength training should look now, as far as like your hard training days, you know, how to be a high level athlete without being, you know, an absolute idiot in the training, in weight training, and then taking everything into consideration, mental, emotional health, like that is super good for the sport. And I think maybe people have done it, they've done it quietly, or, you know, they've found that stuff out on their own and just like gone on with their life. But there's not a lot of people talking about it. I think people know about it, but no one's really kind of like taking that deep dive. So, you know, I know we're talking about Mobility Day, but I just really admire you, and I'm happy that this platform exists in that way, so that people can at least, because maybe someone's thinking that way, but everywhere they look in their gym, they're like, shit, everyone's really hardcore here.
Yeah.
You know, and that's probably not true, because some of that is not even real. That's just like a show that people are putting on for who knows what.
Or how good are they, and how good could they be? Yeah.
Like if you want to be, you know, people can come and go from a sport, that's fine, you know, but there's things that I've done in my life that, you know, I'm not doing anymore. How long will I powerlift? If you want to be here for a long time, it only makes sense to take care of your body, because if you don't have your body, you can't get on the platform. So,
well, I've been going down this, like I said, this deep dive on energy and how the body communicates with the mind.
Yeah.
And I know when you overtrain, it tweaks your thinking.
Yeah.
So even like with I'll wrap this around to mobility work. So if you're feeling good and you're feeling positive, you can be like, oh, I'm going to go do my mobility work today.
Yeah.
If you're overtrained, if your energy is negative and bad, you're going to go, fuck, it's just fucking mobility work. Fuck that. I'm not doing that today. Because it messes with your brain, and you can't see the importance of and what it's going to lead to. So the healthier we can be mentally, the better that's going to help our training. And if you go into the gym, and I like where J.M. Blakely talks about this, there's a lot of guys that are like, oh, I'm hardcore, like I use my anger and I do all this. A happy attitude is going to get you a better session, I guarantee it. And you're going to make better decisions. You know, if you go in the gym and you're like, my shoulder feels kind of weird today. I'm going to go, you know, if you're in a good, happy place, you're going to go, I'm going to go maybe I'm going to try some of this mobility stuff and see if it feels better.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, maybe I need to not train today. If you're in that negative, bad place, you're like, fuck it, I'm fucking doing it. And that's when you hurt yourself.
Yeah. Frustration is a huge energy drain. Particularly, massive. You know, if you're presented with a choice about something you can control, and you're sort of like not making the best choices, like then things become even more frustrating. So yeah, I mean, I think that this conversation, you know, like my piece in this is helping people to understand, you know, physically what their body's going through, how they can help themselves. But it's kind of just like a holistic approach that I don't know if this was here 10 years ago, if this conversation would have been taken seriously.
Probably not, because I've been pushing flexibility and mobility for a long time, and I got a lot of resistance.
Yeah. I mean, people.
But that also makes me, I just had another thought, because I've had a couple clients lately, as I'm getting deeper and deeper into this, who went through some trauma, and they're like, man, my joints just hurt, like my muscles hurt today. And then they'll find a resolution to that situation. They're like, man, it was like a weight just lifted off me. My shoulders feel better now, and And I go, so I wonder if, in terms of mobility work, if you are in a negative and a bad place, it's going to be harder to be effective with your mobility work, it seems to me.
Yeah, I think they kind of inform each other, because I think that's something, again, that people aren't willing to take seriously, that stress impacts us physiologically, you're in traffic and you're trying to get somewhere and there's, you need to be there now, but you're still 10 minutes away. Everything is just like this.
Yes.
That's a really straightforward kind of silly example, but think about like actual stressful situations that people encountered, the loss of a loved one, taking care of someone sick, your dog dying, you get fired, those types of things. Like your body is the only thing that can absorb that kind. So your tension just goes up. So it's kind of like, yes, that is going to play out in your mobility where you might not be able to move as well as you thought you could because you have these, basically external inputs that are way stronger than, what you're able to come with internally because you're dealing with some like, heavy shit, some, metaphorical heavy shit. But I think by doing the movement, just like I said, like the bare minimum, kind of training those end ranges, going through a daily mobility routine, doing some breathing, all this takes 10 minutes. Like that's at least going to, that's going to start to put you on a path of physically healing your body. Now, if you don't take care of the other stuff in the other buckets, then that physical side of things, it's not going to matter. But for some people, and I think athletes, if they can start to work on their physical body, that is kind of like a domino to them being able to like, okay, now I'm going to, start taking a little bit better care of my mental health. Now I'm going to be able to take care of my emotional health. So they talk to each other.
Yeah. Even to the point where if you have that stress all the time, now your shoulders are up in your ears all day long. And that becomes a normal habit. But if you start doing some mobility work and you start getting that mind muscle connection and you start realizing that maybe next time you're stressed out, and your shoulders are in your ears, you're like, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't feel good. Why doesn't this feel good? Oh yeah, relax, like calm down. And I was talking to my 74-year-old clients, and I train them separately. So I was talking to I actually train the whole family now, but I was talking to the mom, and she's like, since you started training with Mark, like his whole personality has changed. And we talk about how he was always, man, he'd drop his head and his shoulders would come up and he was all crabby. And everyone in the family is like, he's totally different now. Like, I mean, cool. his attitude and everything. And everybody's like, did you get taller? Why are you because he's actually standing up straighter and his shoulders are relaxed.
Could be taller. You're just, that's so great. Yeah.
And a lot of that, I mean, it's from the strength training, but a lot of it was the mobility and flexibility. And I go, dude, we got to get your chest open up. We got to get your posterior chain working. And
yeah, you just need access to your own body. And people who are closed in like that, like, that's not what like a confident, happy person looks like.
No. And think about that. If we're going to go down the rabbit hole, think about, when he's away from his training, or say you have a power lifter like that, when he's supposed to be at home recovering, how's his body going to recover if it's still that tense and that tight?
Yeah, you should be able to.
And how's that going to affect his nutrition and what he eats? And like, I mean, it's just huge rabbit hole. It all starts with the energy and the connection between your body and your mind and how they work together.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big missing piece. And, people could take it seriously or they could not take it seriously. As far as, I mean, from a competitive standpoint, I'm like, yeah, laugh it off because like, I know I'll have an edge over you.
Yeah.
But when I think about, like my people and my clients and who I care about, like, of course I want to be able to say like, no, I want to push it for them, make sure they understand how important it is, give credence and validate kind of like not only, kind of where are you today, physically, mentally, emotionally, like that stuff's super important. And I think because I acknowledge it, they start to acknowledge it because maybe they might think like, oh, this is so stupid. This isn't like, why is this impacting me? But by me saying, yes, the reason that you don't feel good right now is because you haven't slept 3 nights in a row because your kid has been sick. Because a lot of people just be like, well, that's not it. And I'm like, no, that is it. There's like, please say yes and let's do better. Yeah.
That example's so funny because isn't it funny I don't know if you're around kids or you had kids or not, but
yeah, I have kids.
So when they're little and you're like, they get crabby and you're like, oh, they need a nap. But then when we're adults, like people do the same thing as adults and we never go, dude, why don't you go take a nap? You're being an ass right now. And most of the time, if they would just get some sleep, they'd wake up and be so much happier and so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. My daughter is 10 and we just went on an international trip to Ireland. And this chick, she closes her eyes. She just puts a hat on over her head, power nap, 10 minutes, wakes up, snack. And then she's like, I'm back. I'm like, okay.
So she can't even recognize it. Like now, if we can not let the
exactly.
adult,
She's like, I'm power. Yeah, she literally would be like, guys, I'm powering down, and she would just go out. I took like 20 pictures of her just sleeping. I'm like, did you sleep the whole trip? But I mean, we had long ass days. We're walking 30,000 steps, and she's like, I need a break. I'm like, you do need a break. Please take one. This is
you just need to not let that adult habit break in and keep her feeling that way.
I literally just realized this like 2 years ago. What she's doing is 10. I'm like, okay, cool. Like. Kids' emotional intelligence these days is way better than when I was. We would have just been like, ignore, keep working, put your head down, shut your mouth.
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest, so I have that definite blue collar mentality.
Yeah.
That I'm still trying to. It's a good one. I want to keep it as like my superpower, but I have to control it. There's a point where it's like, dude, I don't care how much you want to, your body's done.
Yeah.
It can only recover so much. You used it up. Now toughen the hell up and be a man and have the courage to let your body do what it needs to do.
Yeah. Get honest with yourself.
And honest. That's a huge one. Honesty.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I think what you're doing is cool. I've really enjoyed listening to the other episodes, and I don't think we've met in person, but I think we've been like around in the same place at the same time. But yeah.
When I'm around a lot of people, I kind of get zoned.
Yeah.
And like,
well,
I see
if it was at like a meet and I was lifting, I really wasn't paying attention.
Yes, yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Sarah, it's been an awesome conversation. I know I could go longer, but I think you have.
I know.
We're
good. I'm gonna email you some stuff though for internal rotation stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested. Like one of the ones I know right now is like the 90-90 on the floor. I'm freaking horrible at it. Horrible.
Yeah. Gotta find a setup that works good. Yeah.
And I'm this is a problem. Like I shouldn't be this bad at this.
Yeah. I got trying to get into the position first. But yeah, no, thank you for having me on. This has been awesome. And I appreciate the chance to chat about this stuff. I'm passionate about it and kind of bounce ideas. That's really cool.
Yeah. Hopefully I can have you on again. Like almost every guest I've had, I'm like, oh man, there's still more. Like I can't believe I've been doing this sport this long and I still love talking about it and I love learning about it. And because there's so much to it.
Yeah. And I'm like new to this sport and I kind of know like the history, but sort of that like intermediate period, like when you were coming up, like it's like, I know your name, I know who you are, but we weren't crossing paths like when we would never be competing at the same time, that kind of thing. So it's cool for me to kind of just like hear about your journey because like everybody who's in sports has experienced something like what you're saying, where you're just like super hardcore. And then you're like, wait, this isn't working anymore. And some people go one direction and then other people do what you did, which is kind of like take stock, reevaluate, decide about, what's going to be the best for me and what's going to be the best for, this sport and this environment. So I think that that's awesome. And you definitely don't have to. You can just shut down and get on with your life.
Yes. Yeah. There was a couple of years where I went, that's it. No social media, nothing. Yeah. But I was kind of healing myself from my depression and stuff during that time.
Yeah.
I think it's fun now because I like looking back at my career. Not like I'm over it. It's cool. Yeah. I'm happy with what I did. It was great. Yeah. But I'd like to look back because I go, what else can I learn?
Yeah.
And then I'm fascinated with like some of the new, like the Raw guys are doing these insane numbers right now. And it's so impressive. And I'm like, what did they change? And I'm still trying to figure out what could I have done better that I could pass on.
Yeah.
And then like I'm really fascinated with women's powerlifting right now because women are coming up with some very cool stuff.
Yeah. It's exciting.
And how you guys going to the women's pro-am, how the girls interact is quite a bit different than how the guys interact at a meet.
Yeah.
And it's pretty fascinating to watch it. And it's almost like the girls are at a point where powerlifting used to be.
Yeah.
With men, where it was more, hey, we're all together, man. Like I want to win, but I want you to be at your best when I win.
That is the vibe. Like I feel like all the women who, not just the women who I train with, but the women who I know in the sport and respect in the sport, like we are all very much like our performance our best performance is moving this sport along.
Mm-hmm.
If we can do something that like maybe hasn't been done before, or we can, lift numbers that like, 5 years ago, like having a 600-pound squat as a woman was like bananas. And now it's like average.
Yeah.
So, I think all the women are kind of like on board with that, where we realize, oh, the better you do, the better I get. And then this entire sport is just way more competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes more meaningful to be part of it, because it's like, it's not just some like random outlier sport where like, oh, you squatted, 300 pounds, which that's fine. A lot of people can't squat 300 pounds, but like this is serious numbers, and we want to be taken seriously as athletes. And I think by having that attitude, it brings like a level of professionalism to it that doesn't have anything to do with numbers. It has to do with the attitude and how we present ourselves. And I think a lot of the women just, I don't think that's not happening on the men's side of things. I'm just not really paying attention to that. But, I think that that's the vibe that we like kind of do that with with each other.
I would totally agree with that. And you have you go to the women's pro and everybody's lifting great numbers.
Yeah.
Like it's not, there was a time where you'd go to a meet and there'd be like 3 women.
Yep.
And now I don't even know how many women are competing in it, but it's a whole lot more than it was.
Yeah, this past year, both the amateur day and the pro day sold out, which has never happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 120
and the
lifters.
Numbers, it's like, man, the numbers
multiple world
women
records,
are lifting are just absolutely amazing. Yeah. And they keep going up. And I think the women are doing it being way healthier.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be in it a lot longer if they want to.
Yeah, if they want to. Exactly. Yeah. It's hard on your body. And I think, some people, it depends on kind of like what your personality is. I think sometimes people are like, I want to do this one thing. I want to get in and out. Like once I hit it, and I completely respect that. I'm kind of the other way. I'm sort of just like boom, 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 boom. Like, because all the other sports I've done in my life, like I've been powerlifting for 7 years, but I think between soccer and running, I competed at high levels in both of those sports for 20 years. Yeah. So I feel like, I could do this for 10 more years, like whatever, this isn't even where I don't even
hit, I think there's the people that set that number in their brain, and there's the people that are just like I was, okay, I did that. What's next? How much more can I do? Where can I go? How far can I take this?
I've already superseded what I thought I was ever going to do. And so I had to completely reevaluate what my goals meant to me. So, and I think, this is completely departing from what we were talking about, but I think that's the beauty of the sport, right? You can make it what you want it. Yeah. And not every sport is like that.
Mm-mm. There's a lot of avenues for people to do a lot of different stuff in it. Yeah. Sarah, thank you so much for being on. Your Instagram was Persist
Fitness Training is my business. If people care about watching me lift weights, it's SBV. Wait, what is mine? I don't even know what my personal Instagram handle is. I don't know. It's something. It's out there.
It's probably on the Persist one.
It is, yeah.
Somewhere
I used to just have one, but then I was like, oh, I guess I have to do this for business. But my powerlifting stuff, I don't really put on my business page.
Do you have YouTube channels or anything else like that?
I do have, my Persist Fitness Training. That's a YouTube channel. And I have a lot of, not a lot, but maybe 10 or 15 mobility videos on there, including the day. People can message me or email me. And I have a daily routine video that teaches you the head to body.
That would probably be cool for everybody to...
Yeah, everybody.
Come on, suck it up. It's 7 minutes. You can do it and it's going to be good for you.
Yeah, exactly. There's lots of other things you can do in 7 minutes. Instead of going and rolling around on the floor for 45 minutes, do this for 7.
Yes.
You'll feel better. I promise.
And I know you have, if your link tree on Persist, you got a bunch of different other stuff. So if people want to get a hold of you, or if they're in Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's a good way to hit me up is on that link tree for, your audience, the powerlifting mobility stuff that I do. You can be anywhere. I train people all over the United States.
Okay. And do you have one coming up with Laura, a seminar?
Yeah, she and I do seminars basically kind of what we talked about as far as she, goes over conjugate method and teaches people how to utilize that. And then I teach people how to evaluate their own mobility and how to start programming mobility into their strength training sessions. And that's the seminar that she and I have built together.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
So I know you have on Persist Fitness, you have some there.
Yeah, we're going to be in Michigan on October 8th in Ypsilanti at Rusty Barbell Strength and Conditioning. And then you can either, if people follow like the Team Queen Bee Power page or my page, it'll have our like first quarter calendar, of that kind of stuff. I know she and I are, looking at next year to get things scheduled. If people want us to come out or if they want to participate.
Try to get you to the West Coast at some point.
We would love to. She goes out there a couple times a year. I go out there every once in a while.
I'm working on a barn dominium.
Ooh.
And when I do that, it's going to have a nice gym in it. And then I'd love to get people to come out to do stuff.
Yeah, that'd be sick. All right, cool.
All right, thank you for being on. It was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure.
We're gonna have to do it again because there's I think we could just easily keep talking. There's so many different aspects. So thank you again for being on.
My pleasure. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks for listening to the Courage Barbell Unlimited podcast. For more information, please visit couragebarbell.com. Until next time.